Following the 1960 Sharpeville massacre in South Africa, where police fired on unarmed protesters, New Zealand Seafarers held an annual stoppage for many years. In 1972, the Seamen's Union co-sponsored a tour by South African trade unionists. That year, Seamen contributed a day's pay to the South African CTU, Council of Trade Unions, to Congress on the anniversary of the Sharpeville massacre. In 1973, a proposed Springbok tour to New Zealand was cancelled after the Labour Prime Minister, Norman Kirk, expressed the opposition of the government. In 1981, the Conservative, disgraceful National Party government gave the go-ahead for a Springbok tour of New Zealand. The 1981 Springbok tour was one of New Zealand's worst civil disturbances. On the 19th of July, the Springboks were officially welcomed to New Zealand at the Gisborne Marae, and for the next 56 days of New Zealand of the tour, conflict raged throughout New Zealand. More than 150,000 people took part in 200 protests in 28 centres through New Zealand. Over 1,500 people were charged and jailed. Barbed wire and containers were erected around rugby venues. Police armed with long batons and paramilitary-style shields and helmets attacked protests. Some protests adopted peaceful civil disturbance techniques, and at other times militant protesters engaged in running street battles and warring with the police. Seafarers and dock workers were among the tens of thousands of New Zealanders who mobilised to protest against the tour and apartheid regime. Seafarers took strike action in every main centre of the day on each test. The tour went ahead despite the disruption, but it was no victory for the apartheid regime or the disgraceful New Zealand government. Global coverage of the protests embarrassed the New Zealand government, and the South African regime was shocked to see the multiracial unity of New Zealand protests. Nelson Mandela recalled when he was in his prison cell on Robben Island and heard the test match in Hamilton had been cancelled. He said it was as if the sun had come out.
I went to sea at 16 years of age and worked with men, hard men, tough men, but who cared about society, cared about their fellow seafarers and the community at large. I had the good fortune, in some respect, to visit Cape Town on my ship. And the dockers were black and the supervisors were white. I hadn't been ashore, I'd been on the ship. And the white supervisors took it upon themselves that they thought they had a natural right to come and drink and eat in our accommodation, while the black dockers stayed out inside in the sun without water and nourishment. We threw the whites out of our accommodation and told them to piss off. So that was my first experience with injustice at its height. I just seen the outside. I wasn't involved and didn't see the real brutality of what apartheid was about. I soon learned about it. And I remember on the 11th of February in 1990, my kids were pretty upset about it because I got them out of bed at about 3 o'clock in the morning Australian time to let them witness a great event of Nelson Mandela's release out of prison. A fantastic. And there was a ship called the Zeland, a very large oil tanker, that decided to break boycott. It went into Durban on the pretext of engine problems. And while it was alongside, it was secretly pumping its oil ashore and then ballasting back so the vessel never came out of the water, and there was no hint that it was actually discharging the oil and selling it on the black market or selling it to the South African regime. When they finished the oil, discharged, the ship went to sea. They then sent a distress notice out. Mayday, mayday, we're sinking, we're sinking. They scuttled the ship, sunk the ship, and it's the only ship sinking in living memory or history where the crew had their bags packed, all their clothes were on and put in their bags. They had food and water and cut lunches when the ship was sunk. They had sold the ship or sold the oil in the black market and then sunk the ship. It almost bankrupted Lloyd's registry on the insurance. And in Australia, the men and women of my union, whenever we had a South African ship come into port, we would jack it up. We would hold it up for 48, 52, 76 hours. We would drive them bloody mad. And I remember a ship owner coming in, our tug seafarers, our waterside workers, our dockers, would just jack them up. And the black crew on board used to love it. They just thought it was fantastic stuff. And we had a ship owner come and complain to us. He said, why are we always getting our ships held up? I said, because you trade in South Africa. Don't trade with South Africa and you won't have a problem. They said, well, what about the others? We said, others? What others? We weren't aware of the others. He said, yes, the others. We said, who are they? I'll give you a list. So he's given us a list of all the other ship owners. We said, that's what we call a level playing field. So we exact all the other ship owners and got them in the board.
When Nelson Mandela got out of prison, he came to San Francisco. And he says, I want to thank Harry Bridges and the ILWU. Because you know why we did it? Because it was the right thing to do. We had the political courage. We even stood up to Ronald Reagan, the President of the United States. We stood up to the other unions that didn't have the political courage. See, it's funny. People can say one thing. Courage is the #1 ingredient that you have to have in your life to do anything. And you have to know the difference between right and wrong. And you have to stand up. Mandela went to prison because he was a part of that militant resistance. And he was willing to die. And I can say that I come from an organization today, the men and women that I represent, like the MUA, like the Maritime Union of New Zealand, and the younger generation, we are passing that courage down to them, what's right, because the struggle still continues. And when Mandela breathed his last breath, still South Africa is still trying to find their way. And we have to continue to help them, because you know what? The working class, we will always be under attack. We must continue with vigilance. And I missed the opening ceremonies, but I was told, and maybe it goes back to Mandela's life and struggle working people, the video showed struggles that were going on all over the world. We can never forget. And the injury to one is an injury to all, no matter where it's set in the world. And we must continue to be vigilant. We should make no apology. We should be militant. We have made people rich. And one thing about Mandela that he understood being in prison, I went to Robben Island. I saw that little cell. That man always remained humble. And by being humble, he was raised up. And it was in prison that he found himself. Who would have thought a man that went to prison in shackles would come out and be the new president of South Africa? And as you look at these young people here, we have to help them, because they are the Nelson Mandelas. They are the freedom fighters of the next generation. Let's support them. Let's get behind them. Thank you.
Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela,